Hey, my name is Allison Wheeler, and I'm one of the senior leaders over at the Learning Center at UNT. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of being an SI, which is professional communication. And it's important to remember that not only are you a reflection of yourself, but you're also a reflection of the Learning Center. This can be intimidating, but just by following a couple rules, you can and will be successful in this area. Let's just start off with a couple of the basic rules, which the first one being always defer to the professor. At the end of the day, it is their class, and they should have some sort of say in what you're going over in your sessions, and you should be keeping them up to speed with what you're covering as well. Be sure to discuss any advertisements, reviews, announcements, anything you're going to post about the class on Canvas, or just tell your students. Make sure and check up with them pretty regularly so they know what you're covering. Be sure to discuss with your professor any announcements, reviews, advertisements, anything you're going to be providing for your students. Make sure and check with your professor first. Be sure to discuss these things with your professor early on in the semester, so that way you can set some expectations for your role as an SI leader in the class. The second basic rule would be to be a little bit less formal with your students, but still maintain professional standards. As an SI leader, you're in a pretty unique position to be a peer mentor to the students, so we can kind of understand what they're going through a little bit more than, say, a professor would, but it's important to remember to stay professional. This means refraining from things like using profanity in sessions, playing songs that are necessarily distracting or also use profanity in your sessions. Make sure to stay on topic during your sessions and don't say anything negative about your professor. The third basic rule is to always remember that you represent the Learning Center. You're gonna have a lot of communication with students and professors alike, so it's always important to keep this in mind with any communication that you might have. However, if something makes you uncomfortable or you're not necessarily sure how to handle a situation, always defer to your coordinator. Next, we're going to be talking about something incredibly important for professional communication and for your job, and that's managing your emails. Always make sure to use the correct title when referring to your professor, whether that be doctor, professor, etc. Never start an email with just their first and last name, and definitely don't start out an email with just, hey. Always ask or request things from your professor, never tell them what to do. Make sure to CC your senior leader, the program's graduate assistant, and your coordinator with any email correspondence, whether it be with a professor or with students. Be aware of the names that you label your files and attachments, as these will be seen by your recipients. For example, if you're making a test review session, label the file test review session with your class title. Don't just face slam on your keyboard and have a whole bunch of random letters. For example, if you're sending like a review, label it the review and the class title, not just a bunch. Don't just face slam on your keyboard. Should I say that? Is that funny? Is that comedic relief? Okay, so funny. Okay. So now that we've talked about some of the fundamentals for professional communication, we're gonna dive a little bit deeper into email etiquette. So this is an example of a poor email, and first we're gonna look at the subject. So as you can see from the subject of this email, all they have down is question. With any email correspondence with your professor, you always want to have your course code in the subject. The next issue I want to address is this phrasing here, saying I also need to stop by. When you're communicating with your professor, you should always request to see them. If they have office hours that you can attend, always suggest meeting then. If not, you can just ask them if there's any time for them to meet with you outside of their designated office hours. Next, I want to talk about the phrasing of please get back to me ASAP. It's a good idea to have some sort of closure in your emails, but it should ideally be more structured than this. This also seems a little bit suggestive that the professor has an excessive amount of time to email you back, as well as also being a bit presumptuous about the professor's schedule and time frame to respond to you. Lastly, I want to talk about the lack of a signature. With any email that you might have, either a professor or with a student, you should always include your name, the subject that you SI for, and an email to contact you back. Another quick note, you should also always have some sort of greeting, including your professor's name. In this email, as you can see, there's a lack of both a greeting and a closure.
I can't do it. I could do everything else, but this is where my brain says no. Says absolutely not.
Okay, whatever. Okay. With any... So now we're going to take a look at an example of a good email. As you can see here, this email does have a proper subject line. They have their course name and code, as well as the stuff that they want to talk about in the email to their professor. You can also see here that this email also includes a greeting. You can refer to your professors by professors or by doctor if that's what they prefer. And then next, I just want to talk a little bit about this first sentence. It's always nice to start your emails off on a friendly note and not just immediately jump into your question. So asking them, how their week has been or wishing them a good week so far is always a nice way to start an email. This next sentence here is talking about how they appreciated the opportunity to talk with the professor one-on-one after lecture, but they were just wanting to reach out to see if they had any availability to meet. This is a really great way to try and schedule time with your professor, as it not only reminds them of your previous discussion with them in person, you're also requesting to meet with them, not demanding. Another good part of this email is the fact that they address the meeting during their office hours. Again, ideally, that will be the time that you'll be able to meet with your professor, and you can schedule a different appointment if that time doesn't work for you. The ending sentence here is also very good because you're able to go a little bit more into depth over what you would like to discuss with your professor. As you can see here, this person wants to discuss how sessions have been going so far, and if the professor has any recommendations for specific concepts to emphasize on before their next exam. And then lastly, very important, you should always thank your professor for taking the time to communicate with you and read your emails, and always include some sort of signature with your name, the subject you SI for, and an email for them to contact you back. So I really hope this helped y'all looking at some examples of email etiquette with your professor. Now, Rose is going to talk to us a little bit more about in-person communication.
Yay!
Yeah, we did it.
All right. I feel good about that.